Today on It's Art, Let's Talk About It by our friend Bill Farnsworth, who's joining us all the way from Venice, Florida. And Bill, welcome to the podcast.
For having me, Darrell.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. This podcast is one where, I mean, it couldn't be more appropriate for us to title something, It's Art, Let's Talk About It, because that's what we do. We talk about art and artists and people of interest in the art world. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Let's start with some of the basics, some of the questions. Are you one of those guys who knew from the time you were 3 years old that you were going to be an artist?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I mean I just started drawing on the walls of my bedroom, um, and and then my parents wallpapered over the walls and got me some paper from my grandfather, who had this graph paper that was about 3 feet wide. It was he was a lace designer. He designed women's lace back in the 20s. Was gainfully employed all the way through the depression of designing this stuff, which was boggles my mind when you're thinking about something that seems expendable. But so it was white on the backside. I rolled a big paper down the middle of the living room, and I was heavily influenced by Disney characters. So I started drawing birds and characters and um, so in the third grade, I could draw Donald Duck pretty well, um, and so I drew these Donald Ducks out on a piece of paper, and I'd sell them to my classmates for a nickel a piece.
good for you.
And yeah, and by that time, I was a bit of a class clown, so I was already back in the corner, away from all the other children.
Giving you more room to draw, right?
Yeah, yeah, I had my own studio. The teacher made me give the money back, but I that was my first illustration project.
Did they get to,
Yeah, I never kept one of them, but yeah. So it was always something I did. It was just drawing. Never just something that I gravitated toward.
for those people who don't know your history in the art business, all the way through high school, college? Do you
Yep.
go to art school specifically?
Yeah, yeah. So I took in high school. Um, I enjoyed history in high school, but I took every single art course they had, um, and just doubled up on that, and then decided that when I was around 14, I heard about that you can make a career uh, doing this occupation called illustration.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And I didn't know, when I grew up in Connecticut, there were illustrators that lived up in my town. In fact, they were my sister was friends with Mark English, the great illustrator,
Sure. Yeah.
and but I didn't know that at all what he did. I just knew I liked to draw, so so I went to Ringling School of Art because they had an illustration program.
Yeah, they
That
did.
was 1970. It was a 3-year program, 1977 to 1980, and it was illustration graphic design. So I got production and typography, and it was good stuff. But I would have preferred to go full time, painting right then and there. But I learned it was a great education, a great time there. The instructors were it's all about the instructors, and they gave me a good start.
Well, so college was mostly illustration, and then I mean, did you work as an illustrator after that?
Yeah, and I thought I was. Now I had a job to go work for American Greetings right out of art school,
Okay.
and I didn't take it because I wanted to focus on New York and more towards publishing industry. Which in hindsight, for the years, I thought, well, that would have been a good stepping stone. But then I never would have met my wife, so it all worked out.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so that I started taking little jobs wherever I could.
Okay.
I was doing these covers for this plastics company that had it was I had they wanted me it was injection molding was what they I mean it was the most boring thing you could
Huh.
possibly think of, and the cover was this giant phallic screw floating through space, and I had to make it look like their product of this giant screw. And but I think I worked, did it for $250 or something. And then, you pick up jobs here and there. I was working full time for my dad's surveying company. So I was doing illustrations on the side and at night. It only took me 10 short years to go full time at illustration.
At what point did you decide to go to fine art?
It was probably maybe about 2005. The illustration, children's books, what I was my forte, and so I had at that point had illustrated up to about 60 children's books,
Okay.
and many historic in nature because I always gravitated toward that. I love getting into the history of something, and because the history or real stories about people. So the historic end of it, I did work, illustration work on Lewis and Clark, um, the lots of different Native American tribes,
Right.
and I love doing that. A picture book with it's all your own art. But that was it took a while, to get into that. And once I got into it, I got a few jobs, and then but the break between going full time was pretty stressful because I had to put food on the table, and we had rent and due and all that stuff. So I just I learned how to hustle and never stop, never stop. You can't in this business you can't just focus on one direction. You have to focus on five different directions and go different ways throughout your career and turn over every rock. Um, and it's just being just dogging it. I think smarter people would have found something more lucrative to do.
We talk about that all the time on this podcast, and when I'm
Right.
speaking with artists, this is a scary way to make a living
Oh,
because so many unknowns.
yeah.
And as you know, and I've said this on many podcasts, it's the only profession in the world where all you have to do is say, I am,
Right.
and you are, right? I'm an artist. And
Well, right. And there's plenty of them out there.
yeah,
I'd
I
say
see,
that.
I see 200 a year that's come in, the first thing out of their mouth says, I'm an artist. I want to be in your show, right? And then, whether they can compete with the Bill Farnsworths of the world, in our exhibitions, that's a different story. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a scary way to make a living. How would you classify the art that you're currently doing today? Is it realism? Is it land? I mean, it's landscape in a lot of sense. It's Western in its nature.
Yeah. I think, when I'm here, I take my easel outside here in Florida, and I do a lot of coastal scenes. I do a lot of marine work, but I've been moving last few years. I've been moving more towards uh, the Western art because there's so many possibilities.
Right.
Um, Obviously, new clientele from your museum and people that's opening up new venues for me, and it's just great subject matter. So I would call it realism.
Okay.
Um, it's more, I guess, painterly. Um,
It
you
is.
know, I like to see brushwork in paintings. I love the work of Bill Anton.
Sure.
Just as not even the cow. If you left the cowboys off the side and just his landscapes, you can learn a lot from them.
Well, yeah. Do you do any figurative work, cowboys?
Oh yeah,
Guys?
yeah. I've been kind of keeping them at about mid range.
Okay.
I want the I want the landscape to rule the day, and to be the big moment. But the little, cowboy or a figure, anything can give the painting scale and a little bit of narrative.
In one of the paintings in our current exhibition, there is a figure.
Uh-huh.
But I think it's a workman of some sort, a metalsmith or a farrier or a farmer
Uh-huh.
or something. But the other are strictly landscapes. And so one of the questions people have been asking me is, what does he, does he do those kinds of things? The Cowboys and Indian motif that
Yeah,
so
you
many.
know, right. I like drawing the figure. I had to draw it thousands of times for
Sure.
children's books, and it had to be accurate, because if you don't learn how to draw, it's it can be a lonely life. You
Yeah,
know, you're not going to get hired. And it's
sure.
just
Sure.
out of. I think the best motivator for an artist is sheer fear. It is with everybody.
Yeah, little dude.
Right, right. You're going to get it right if you got mortgage due.
It's the same way in the museum industry, by the way. So it doesn't change
Absolutely,
much.
absolutely,
We're
absolutely. So
we're putting out a product that people don't, I mean, in one sense, don't really need.
right,
We talk about the basic survival things, but they need it
right.
for the soul, and it's kind of so hard sometimes to sell that. But
Yeah,
we,
people, they, it's no, it doesn't. It's not food. It's not water or
yeah,
shelter, but it feeds the soul.
but it is
And
important. Yeah,
yeah, it feeds the soul, and it's something that it makes our lives better. When you have a painting hanging on the wall that means something to you, and you remember the night you bought it, it reminds you of something in your life that you can go back to, and get home. You're tired. You're in your own beautiful home. You look up at that art. It takes you to a different place.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
If people want to see your work, and a lot of people listen to this podcast, and and they'll get on their laptops and play along, right? I mean,
Right.
how do they find Bill Farnsworth? Is it
I'm very easy. I could probably not do the witness relocation program because it's
yeah,
just, yeah, it's just billfarnsworth.com.
just simple first name, last name,
Yeah.
Dill, and
Right.
Farnsworth, just like it sounds,
Billfarnsworth.com. Yeah.
just
There
like it
was
sounds.
another, I got that, I got that web name, early on because there was another guy 2 weeks later, a videographer named Bill Farnsworth out west, and he emailed me and said, "You beat me by 2 weeks."
Sorry, dog. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
otherwise, you'd have to call yourself Bill Farnsworth Studio or Bill Farnsworth.
right. That's the reason I ask. I mean, sometimes you do get lucky, like you did, with just Bill
Yeah,
Farnsworth.
right. And then if you just Google my name, you'll get there anyway.
Bill Farnsworth artist is what I will tell people a lot to do.
It's easy. Yeah, there's just it's just pretty much me.
Yeah.
Nobody else wanted the
Of
job.
course, I got a friend, Bill Smith. He's an artist, and that is just terrible. That
Yeah,
you would. So Farnsworth is better than Smith, I guess. And
yeah, right, 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 right.
that's what galleries would you be represented? Do you
Well,
have
in
gallery
Texas, yeah, in Texas, I'm represented by just recently became represented by the Good Art Gallery
representation?
in Fredericksburg,
Huh?
and then I'm in Hindus Fine Art in San Antonio,
Okay.
and I've got 3 galleries in Florida. There's Charleston, the Rhino Gallery.
Right.
Yeah, and then uh, I'm in the Warm Springs. I think there's about 10 galleries.
Okay.
So
If people want to see that work that's available for sale, is it on your website?
yeah, everything. Because if you see a painting that you like, I use Faso. So if you see the painting you like, it's tells you where it is,
Okay.
and
So they
you can click.
can
Yeah,
get
it's beautiful. You can click the link, go right to the gallery.
other people that we've interviewed on this podcast who are in our exhibition show. For the most part, have been able to say, and we still have 2 left or 1 left. But
Right.
we don't have any left.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, 40th Roundup exhibition and sale. We sold out of your work first night.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And so
you
that's
know,
always
knock on
exciting
wood.
for you.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's exciting, and when you have a sale, it makes you believe that it's possible, that this whole thing that surfs from a hobby to a profession is possible. Because if I'm not selling, it starts to become a hobby. But the reaction with my work over the last 5 years has jumped tremendously, and people have always loved my work, but they weren't pulling the trigger. I mean, a little bit, you go along, you sell paint here and there, but in the last 5 years, it's been really awesome.
Obviously, the Museum of Western Art is proud to represent you,
Thank you.
in exhibitions because obviously the work is great. It's phenomenal, but we always love a sale. We love
Yeah,
to help the artist and help ourselves a little bit. So
right. Yeah, it's hard to nail down the motivation that people have with buying a piece of art. It's a very personal thing.
yes,
They have to have the means, the desire, the taste for that art, and a place for it. So that's a tall order, but it's very personal because it's like my paintings are like orphans. They've found a home, and that's pretty cool.
I've always told artists in the 40 some odd years I've been doing this that it's got to be just stressful to throw a baby out there to the world and say, "Will
Yeah.
you adopt it?"
Well,
Because
I say have a good life,
sometimes
hang on your way.
we're joined today by our good friend Bill Farnsworth on It's Art. Let's talk about it. A production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network and the Museum of Western Art. For those of you just joining us and playing along, Bill paints out of Venice, Florida, and has been an illustrator and all sorts of cool things. And we appreciate you joining us today on It's Art. Let's talk about it, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Darrell.
All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of it. What's your typical painting day look like, or is there a
Well,
typical?
yeah, I always have something floating around in my head, and when I go to sleep at night, I'm thinking about a painting. Um, Hopefully, I'm thinking about a painting and not bills. But I lay the groundwork the day before, and I'm thinking about a sketch. So I'll go in. I have a sketch and an idea ready, and then I usually try to put out the fires in the morning of just stuff that has to get done. And there's so much little stuff. When you work out of your house, you're constantly being reminded of that. If I was painting a little while ago, and uh, the, we have an African gray parrot named Oliver, and he decided that he wanted to see me, so he flew into the studio.
There you go.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit dangerous for him to flying around and with all the paint and everything. But I'll get in and turn the music on and hopefully get going by about 8:39.
Okay.
And I'll paint till I'm starving, and then go in and eat a sandwich over the sink. Sometimes I'll go outside if it's nice weather, but I get back to it within a half an hour, and continue working. um, I've been working more methodically lately, so I'll leave the brushes out in all the full palette, and I won't clean everything down at night. I'll come back, and because at night I may come in and just look at it a little bit, and pop it with whatever I think it might need.
Right.
But it's I like working that way because it's you see the painting in different angles, different days, and you're building up layers. And I think it's a good way to work. I work very fast because I was an illustrator. So a large painting, I block in within a day or two, and
Okay.
then I go back into it. And but it's that following weeks where I'm picking it up, going back. I might have 4 or 5 paintings I'm working on here, and so I'm work on one, and you see something that's either bothering you or you're loving it. So you fall in love at a certain point with the painting, and it doesn't need anymore. But other paintings, just you go by, you keep walking by them. So I have them all around my studio. I've got in behind my monitor there. There's a bunch of little 6x8 sketches, and I can continue to look at them and think, that deserves to be painted.
I ask artists all the time, do you work on one painting at a time or do you work on multiples?
Yeah.
And I get the full range. I mean, I interviewed somebody the other day who, would make him absolutely crazy to work on more than one painting at a time from start to finish. And then, guys like my friend Billy Shank, who's
Hmm.
a pop artist, he's got 10, 15 going at one time, right? So I get the full range. You have
Yeah.
4 or 5 going at any one point?
Yeah, it's I like to do a painting and get it 95% finished in a couple days.
Okay.
And then because anything with like edges, I want to have the paint still soft where I can adjust edges and so forth. So I'll leave that open for going back the next day or so, and then I can let it sit for a while. Bring it back, maybe hit it with retouch varnish, and then go back into it if it needs. Sometimes a painting will paint itself, and it's done, and then I'll set that one aside and pick up another one. And I think it's a matter of it's keeping yourself interested, and if it gets to the point where you're just kind of bored with it, um, I've got stacks of paintings that probably outnumber the books behind you, and that were just okay. And there's the better you get, the more critical you are. And
Right.
I think in the last 5 years, I'm more critical, and which is good because it's part of the growth thing, and that's what makes it so much fun. Is that
I one time asked the late artist Roy Anderson what his
right?
favorite painting was, and he said, "My next one."
Yeah,
I mean, it was always
right,
that growth with him. It was all about the
right,
next painting, the one that was
right.
and so you paint on a number of them at a time, different subject matter? And the reason I'm asking is a lot of people who listen to this podcast, we've determined a lot of our audience are young
Right.
painting students, young artists, and they kind
Uh-huh.
of want to get into the head of somebody who's established and doing it well. And they want to kind of know that maybe they're not the only one out there that's working on multiple subject matters at one time or
Right.
paintings at one time or absolutely hates the work,
Yeah.
and has
I,
abandoned
yeah. Right. Yeah, and I do paint on a few of them at a time. I've got 6 or 7 that I'm working on, and they're close to finish. But I just they don't need much. Maybe a half a day to push it over the finish line. Um, but I do work a lot of subject matter. There's a lot of things that excite me, and so I'm never bored when I come in here. It's almost like a candy shop. I come in, I'm looking all over the place, like, look at that. Oh, I got to paint that, and or pick up a plein air study. I said, geez, I forgot about this one. I gotta paint this. So I'm painting Florida scenes, western mountains, and low country marshes. It's for me, it's just about the light and the abstract qualities of the painting. So
Right.
it's just an alley with trash cans can look beautiful if it's got the right light.
That's true. That is true. Who were your mentors in your career? In particular, you wanna mention?
Well, yeah, I think the ones that I in illustration, what the artist that I really idolized was Bernie Fuchs, N.C. Wyeth,
Okay.
a lot of the greats, Dean Cornwell. They were just brilliant, absolutely brilliant artists, and many of them transitioned easily from illustration into fine art because they could draw and paint. But the fine artists, of course, Sargent, the usual suspects,
Right.
Soroya, Fetchin,
Sure.
Zorn, that it's just I'm lost for words at how beautiful the paintings they have done and what they've left society is tremendous. And I, that's why whenever I can go to a museum and see the painting right up close.
Yeah.
And I was passing through Atlanta area this past week and on the way to Nashville and stopped into the Museum of Western Art in Cartersville,
The booth. Right.
the booth,
Yeah, good
and
friends of ours. Booth. We work with them all the time. Yeah.
yeah, wonderful work.
It's
And I
fabulous.
got
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I got to see Howard Turpning right up close. I had never seen a Howard Turpning, and he was an illustrator, and I love the narrative. His Indians were individuals. They all look different, yet they're all very strong, classic Native American structure. And that's tough to do. That's really tough to do. You can see a lot of Native American paintings. You'll see them all in a painting. They all look alike because we use one model.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did a lot of illustration where I used myself. And you're looking around. Well, there's Bill. There's Bill. There's Bill again.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
So
we've had that joke. There's some artists you look at it in their paintings and you see them in every painting. It's the face they've seen the most, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and
Weird, Yeah,
right. Rockwell purposely put himself into many paintings.
he did.
It's kind of fun. And when my models were always people that I knew, family, friends were always in my paintings. So that I think it makes it more interesting because you're kind of bringing them in, and it's very rewarding.
When you paint, when you do a painting, do you paint from a reference photo or do you use a number of different photos? I mean, and the reason I
Yeah,
ask, a lot of
yeah,
artists paint just one scene that they've taken with a camera, while
right,
others, my friend Bob Pummel comes to mind. The tree may be in one photo and the wagon from his head and
right,
the brick wall from a different photo, or a different
yeah,
scene. He's creating, and yet I also see, painters who'll get out there and they'll paint the same thing. They'll even paint the telephone pole coming out of the back of somebody's head, which,
yeah.
I try to educate them to take artistic license. What's your process for doing that? Is it always
Well, yeah.
it?
I'll have ideally if I have a plein air study for the landscape part of it, then I can, I've got accurate color, and you always get something more personal through a field study because you don't have this camera as the middleman. So you've got better color and more accuracy, and you're capturing the essence, and that's important is to capture that right away, uh, because it's your title. It's what's going to grab someone.
Right.
And then I have reference of cowboys. I might go to the stockyards in Fort Worth and photograph the cowboys in costume. And that's as an illustrator, I was able to take a figure and move it around. But you have to make sure it's the right lighting and it's the right perspective because it can look very very odd.
Right.
So it's just years of that I gravitate toward the figure. I always have, but I don't necessarily do it all the time because sometimes it's just not necessary.
One of the questions I like to ask artists who've been in the business a while, more than just a few years. I interviewed a young artist the other day who's, he's in his 20s. I didn't ask this question. That is, what advice would you give, to young artists?
Hmm.
And I asked him at the end of it, is there anything that you've been hoping you could, and he said, I was hoping you'd ask me what advice I could give to young artists. And I kind of thought that was funny because he's a young artist. What advice could he possibly have? And yet it was still very good advice. So I think I'm going to start asking it of everybody. There are people who are going to be listening to this podcast and they're going to, they're trying to learn something from it.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give a young artist, a new person who's using that I am an artist mantle for the first
Right. Well, I think that as a young artist, and I'm not anti art school. I think that going to a 4-year college and major in illustration and painting, um, you're going to be bogged down with a lot of other classes for a very expensive price. However, the camaraderie that you have in the school environment is wonderful, and
right.
I remember that. I remember just and there's competition with camaraderie, and it's great. But a student could take some of that money and maybe go to an atelier or all the great workshops throughout the country.
Sure.
I mean, uh, if I was beginning, I'd take a workshop from Quan Ho. If Bill Anton taught anything, or if he was willing to do works, I'd take from him. Anybody, all those artists that I admire, and then you work your butt off, take a few workshops from them, stay with them for a while, and then go back and work your butt off, and then come back, take some more workshops, and then spend a year just working your butt off. There's no shortcut to success in art. You can't just to be successful. You can't just throw money at advertising and suddenly say I'm successful,
Right.
because all the successful artists went through the process of blood, sweat, and tears, and some professions, they might take you from 0 to 60 in a very short period of time, but it's and for me, some artists can move right along, and it snaps with them and they can move right along. I need to make lots and lots of mistakes and to learn, and I think it's been important. I think if I look back, hindsight's 2020, I would do things differently. And then I thought, well, maybe this was the process that I needed to get to that next lily pad. And I never want to put time limits on. You know, I only have so much time, and I got to do it. I hear a lot of artists that are just getting into the business. They've always wanted to paint. They had a full-time job, and they're retired from that, and they want to get into the art, but they're every one of them says, I'm running out of time. I said, it's I don't mean to be trite about it, but it's it's a journey. It's not the destination, and you have to enjoy every moment of it, and you make small increments of improvement through hard work.
That's a very solid, good answer for what seems like a simple question, but it really is not. I mean, what advice do you give to young people is important.
Right. You look at all those musicians. I mean, we were in Nashville over the weekend and listening to these struggling uh, young artists who are just so talented. And you think, well, I could listen to them on an album. I'd buy it right now. But
Right.
that doesn't the way, it's not how the wheels of Nashville go. And they, it enormous amount of work and enormous amount of self doubt. My
Yeah.
studio. in my on my easel, you can't see it, but I just put a little sign right on the edge of my easel, my wall that I have, and I just said believe, because if you don't, you won't.
Well, that's very solid advice. Yeah, that really is good. Opportunity now for shout outs to people in your life, personal individuals, family members. Is anybody out there that you just got to say thank you to?
Oh well, my wife naturally that would be
Yeah, you were just to not do that, but
she's put up with an artist career, um, but she believed in me and what I was doing, and we were able to move from Connecticut and set up a new place to live, and we have flexibility because I could move around. We could move anywhere. I didn't have a specific job.
right.
Um, so in my entire family, my two daughters and my brothers and sisters, we're all very supportive, including my parents. They had a lot of doubt in what if this was going to even happen, a lot, but they didn't let me.
Artist, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't let me. They didn't say, like their parents said, um, this is not, this is not a viable and a viable career because you're going to starve. And many do, but I think as an artist, there's probably a lot more musicians that are starving than artists, because it's just that career is, I can't imagine how hard it is, and you still got to be great, so it's I think illustration was what helped me uh, train me to be a better fine artist.
From your starts as a somebody who hawked a 5 cent, was it nickel?
Yeah, my
Pieces,
first my
Donald
dollar
Duck,
nickel.
to where you are selling out at the Museum of Western Art in our
Yeah,
40th annual Roundup show. Not a bad, not a
yeah.
bad way.
If you could find one of those Donald Duck's drawings out there, they're worth 10 cents today.
They've doubled in value. You
Oh, it
can't,
doubled in value. Yeah, it's a good
yeah,
investment.
not a bad. Our guest today on It's Art, Let's Talk About, has been Bill Farnsworth, a painter in Venice, Florida. And Bill, we appreciate your support of the Museum of Western Art. We appreciate the art that you're creating. Obviously, our fans and our patrons love it because you sold out your first, show here at the museum. Your second show, I guess,
Yep.
sold out in your second show here, and people just couldn't get enough of it. And so we hope to see a lot more of you. And if you're ever in the area, we want you to come by the Museum of Western Art.
I will for sure, Darrell. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for being on the podcast today. For those of you listening, we're located at 1550 Bandera Highway in Kerrville, Texas, or find us on the web at museumofwesternart.com. You talk about easy to remember,
Yeah.
museumofwesternart.com. BillFarn.com is where you're going to find the work of Bill Farnsworth. And go out there and support the arts, because it's art and we need to talk about it. Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Darrell. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.